Does Mage have the worst start out of all the classes? There's been a lot of chatter about this topic lately, and maybe there's some truth behind it, because early game Mage was specifically mentioned in the March State of the Game post. In the post, the Terraria team mentioned their intentions to keep all the classes in line with each other. But is the early game for Mage actually that bad that even the devs have to acknowledge it? Well, I think there are several issues with early game Mage, but one of the main ones boils down to how many hoops you have to jump through just to get your first Mage weapon. And before we jump into the weapons, I think I already know what some of you might say. Just use a different class weapon, or pre-hard mode Mage sucks anyway, just wait until hard mode, or something like that. And you know what? Those are pretty valid suggestions, because Terraria isn't a game where you're forced to lock yourself into one specific class or playstyle, so if a class kinda sucks at a certain part of the game, there's nothing stopping you from playing a different class or using other weapons. At the same time, some people just want to stick with one class and just play the game like that, and with how much the classes have been fleshed out with balance changes and new additions over the years, it's surprising that early game Mage still feels so demoralizing to play. It almost feels like the game is telling you that the best way to start a Mage run is to just not be a Mage at all. When you start a run in Terraria, everything kinda sucks. Your movement is bad, your tools are weak, and dealing with enemies really sucks. You need to get a weapon ASAP, or else enemy encounters will look like this. An ideal starter weapon should be something you can obtain very early into your run, while also being consistently obtainable on every run. Because while there are many weapons you can find early on through RNG, eventually you'll have a start where the numbers are not in your favor. On top of that, the ideal starter weapon should also be obtainable without having to kill anything, because you kinda need a weapon to kill things in the first place, unless you're using lava. Now, when you look at classes like melee and range, getting the first weapon is almost effortless. With melee, you quite literally start with the weapon. But admittedly, the copper short sword does suck, but you can easily cut down a few trees and make a wooden sword. With the range, it's a pretty similar situation. You just chop down some trees, get wood, and you have access to a wooden bow. What about ammo? At the start of the game, you're gonna have to think real hard about resource management, right? Not with this class. You just get a bunch of stone and you're pretty much set. It's also worth noting that pots can give you ranged weapons as well, and pots are pretty common on the surface and in caves. You can pretty much think of the wooden weapons as a baseline for melee and range. If you get screwed by RNG and you can't get any of these other potential early weapon options, then at least you still have a weapon to fall back on, which puts you in a way better position than having no weapon at all. Now we're on to Summoner, and while Summoner doesn't have the easiest time finding the first weapon, it's definitely not that bad. Most of the early Summoner weapons don't exactly meet the standards of an ideal starter weapon because they're gated by combat or completely reliant on chance to obtain, so the only real options left are these three. 1.4.5 added a bunch of Summoner weapons, but the Cobweb is really the only new addition that helps Summoner at the very start because the materials are basic and fairly easy to obtain. Outside of the Cobweb, you have the Leather Whip, which you can buy as soon as you get the Zoologist to spawn, and to get her to spawn you need to fill out enough of the bestiary by getting close to random critters so they get logged, and opening up NPC dialogue boxes. And then you also have Abigail's Flower, which you can get from placing tombstones and waiting however long it takes until the game feels like spawning it. So compared to melee and range, you're not getting a weapon 30 seconds into your Summoner run, but you're also not doing anything too convoluted. At the end of the day, when the RNG weapons fail you, all you have to do is collect spiderwebs, look at bugs, or literally do nothing, and you can still guarantee a weapon. So all that's left is Mage. For potential first Mage weapons, you have a choice between a weapon that you can only randomly find in surface chests, a weapon you can only find randomly in chests in the lower parts of the underground desert that is also guarded by giant tapeworms and spiky watermelons that will surely one-shot you. or weapons in the evil biomes that have a guaranteed chance to drop for range, because range definitely needs that. For Mage, it's just another coin flip. Have you noticed a pattern so far? Yeah, none of these are guaranteed. So naturally, the only option left are the gem staves, or staffs, or whatever you want to call multiple staff items. I played RuneScape as a kid, getting my battle staves every day, so I'm gonna say staves. Also, they wrote gem staves in the official State of the Game post. But anyway, even with the gem staves, you're still not gonna escape the influence of RNG with your first mage weapon because of Terraria's counterpart or generation mechanic thingy. You know, the mechanic that decides whether your world will have silver instead of tungsten or lead instead of iron. That mechanic is going to dictate which staff you get to make, because you might want the diamond staff and you may even find all the diamonds you need, but the world gen put you in a gold world, so now you need to go back and find gems you can actually use. And I know there's going to be some people saying just use an extractinator or just shimmer to get the ores or gems that you need. But realistically, you won't always find an extractinator that easily when you need one. And having to triangulate the shimmer location is so much work, just for a first weapon. But at the end of the day, can we at least say Mage has one guaranteed weapon? Yeah, I guess we can count the staves. You technically just have to mine enough, and the counterpart or mechanic thing will only be a hindrance, but it won't completely stop you. But even when you do finally get your first mage weapon, you're not really in the clear just yet. Because unlike most of the other classes that can just get their weapon and start using it, Mage's weapon usage depends on their resource, mana. And if you've been so locked in trying to get this first weapon that you haven't been passively collecting stars this whole time, you now have to derail your progress and spend at least a few nights getting stars so that your weapon is actually usable. Now, Mage isn't the only class whose weapons rely on a resource, but Mage has a mana cap. So it's not like you can just get yourself to 1000 mana and stop caring about resource management like you can with ranged and ammo. But whatever, it's been like 3 hours, you have your first weapon, it took a few nights but you increased your mana a bunch. Surely there's nothing else holding back early game Mage, right? Well, there's one more thing. Despite you just increasing your mana a bunch, you'll soon run into a fight where your mana is depleted, but the enemy is still alive. So how do you regenerate mana so that you can still keep dealing damage? Well, you have one of two options. You can either stop doing damage completely by not attacking so your mana regens, or you can drink a mana potion that restores your mana, but you also get mana sickness, which hits you with a brief damage penalty, which lowers your damage. Either way, you're losing damage. There's no motion sickness penalty for swinging your sword too much, and your arms don't get fatigued for shooting a billion arrows, but for the crime of simply using your weapon for too long as Mage, you get punished with a damage penalty. Amazing. When you're later on into the game, you have more access to things that help regulate your mana usage, like accessories, other potions, and buildings. But with early game Mage, you're not going to be able to easily access these items, so mana sickness feels even more punishing at this point. Overall, early game Mage has a lot of factors working against it. You have weapons that you either aren't guaranteed to get, or they're kind of tedious and time consuming to obtain. Then you have to deal with low mana while you build it up so that you can actually use your weapons. And then even when you do have mana, you still have to play this minigame with mana usage and mana sickness, which affects your damage for weapons that aren't even that crazily strong to begin with. Individually, these things aren't that bad, but Mage has to deal with all three at once right from the very beginning. So it definitely makes the Mage start feel way worse than the other classes. Honestly, maybe that guy was right. Maybe you should just pick up a sword and then deal with Mage later on when you have weapons that are easier to get and you've already maxed out your mana and you have easier access to resources that help with mana usage. Is there any hope that the early game for Mage might be improved? Yeah, probably, because the Terraria team seems to be cooking something up based on the recent State of the Game post. They've already showed off that the gem staves might each have their own unique abilities, which I don't know if that helps with their accessibility issue, but at least it's something. More importantly, they showed this Daybloom weapon, which I presume is a mage weapon. There's no insight on how to make it yet, but hopefully it's something simple enough that is also easy to get every time, like the wooden weapons for the other classes. There isn't any info on what else they may change for early game Mage, and I know some people hope mana gets reworked overall, but for me, outside of mana sickness, I'm alright with the system, and I think having to manage low mana at the start is exactly what you would expect from a mage, and it adds a good amount of friction as well. Either way, if anything else does change, I'm sure they'll make the right choices. Don't forget, it wasn't that long ago that Mage needed 10 whole stars for 1 mana crystal. Then that changed to 5, and now we're at 3. So for now, I'll trust their judgment and wait to see what else they may have in store for us with Mage in the next update. But let me know in the comments if you think Mage has the worst start out of all the classes, and what are you looking forward to in the 1.4.5.7 update whenever that drops. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos, and thanks for watching.